إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستهديه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله تعالى من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء، واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم، ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. ثم أما بعد، فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله جل وعلا، وإن خير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم، وإن شر الأمور محدثاتها، وكل محدثة بدعة، وكل بدعة ضلالة، وكل ضلالة في النار. أجارني الله وإياكم من النار. ثم أما بعد. All praise and thanks belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and may the peace and blessing of Allah be upon His servant and final messenger Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. As to what follows, my dear respected brothers in Islam, inshallah ta'ala, in today's brief khutbah, what I'd like to share with you is a few reflections from a remarkable surah in the Qur'an, that is Surah Luqman. And I wanted to dive into the advice that Luqman alayhi salam gave his son. Now, if I can just request from all of you to come forward so the people in the back can have a chance to sit. What is remarkable, first and foremost to begin with, is that the passage of Luqman in Surah Luqman, one thing that you reflect on and one thing that you see inside of this is that when Allah Azza wa Jal spoke to us about Luqman alayhi salam, He did not speak to us about what kind of prayer did Luqman alayhi salam engage in, what kind of raka'at did he used to pray at night and so on. Allah didn't tell us this about Luqman. He did not even tell us about the fasting of Luqman and what kind of righteous person Luqman was. Allah did not tell us about his sadaqat, what he used to give, what he used to do. It didn't tell us of what good Luqman alayhi salam did. Although there is one entire page about the mention of Luqman alayhi salam in the surah, the only thing that Allah told us about Luqman was his advice to his son. That's all. Nothing else about the life of Luqman. And one thing that what that teaches you is that Allah Azza wa Jalla is teaching the importance of parenting or being a father. So much so that Allah Azza wa Jalla chose from the entire life of Luqman to just tell us in one page how he was towards his son. And that was enough. And it's in the Qur'an until the day of judgment. People will take guidance and wisdom and direction in life from this one page. So the first thing that you need to focus on is how he began his advice with his son. Now, of course, this page, it's an entire page, it's in Surah Luqman. He begins by saying to him, Ya bunayya la tushrik billah. Oh, my son, do not commit shirk with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Of course, that's the first advice. Then the next advice is about his parents. And then the third and fourth advice. This is what I want to share with you, the middle of it. And subhanAllah, what's very incredible to realize as well is that every single time he began with a new advice to his son, he'd begin by saying, Ya bunay, Ya bunay, Ya bunay, Ya bunay. It's like 3 times in one page. Not only that, if you look into the entire Qur'an from the beginning to the end, you find when the prophets gave advice to their children, or when they even just spoke to their children, they began with these words, Ya bunay. Like you see in the example of Yaqub alayhi salam, as he's dying. He says to his children, Ya baniya inna Allah astafa lakum ad-din. Ya bani is the plural. So he directs and he says to them, my dear children, Allah has chosen the deen for you. And you find in other cases like Ibrahim alayhi salam, he says to his son Ismail, he says, Ya bunayya inni ara fil manami anni adbahu. He didn't just say to him, I see in the dream I'm slaughtering you. He said, Ya bunay, my dear son, I see in the dream I'm slaughtering you. And you find it all over in the Quran. Yaqub alayhi salam, when he lost his child Yusuf alayhi salam, and then he says to his brothers, he says, Ya baniya dhahabu fatahassasu min Yusuf. My dear children, go and look for Yusuf alayhi salam. So now this calls the person that reads the Quran and listens to the Quran to focus on these two words, Ya bunay, Ya bani. What is intended behind them? How come they're repeated often in the Quran? And you know the Quran, the word of Allah Azza wa Jal, is a perfect divine word of Allah. And what's repeated in the Quran, it's got to be a lot of importance. There has to be importance for something to be repeated in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's word. And you find that in this, specifically in Surah Luqman, that one page, in Luqman alayhi salam's advice to his son, one page, 3 times, Ya bunay, Ya bunay, Ya bunay. So why did Allah choose to tell us that when Luqman began the advice to his son, he began with the words, Ya bunay, and then he said his advice. And then again, Ya bunay, and said his advice. Now the first thing is, the words Ya bunay. A rough translation will yield my son. But let me tell you, there are 2 ways on how you can call out to your son, to your child. You can either say Ya ibni, that means my son, or you could either say it in this other form, which is in the Quran, Ya bunay. These are 2 ways. And what's the difference between the 2? Ya ibni just means my son. Ya bunay, this form in Arabic, it's called ism tasghir. In other words, Ya bunay, it's my son, but it implies love, care, compassion, mercy, more than the word Ya ibni. So when he says to him, Ya bunay, in other words, he's saying to him, my dear son, son, I love you. Listen to what I have to say. That's not the normal kind of calling out to your child. That would have been Ya ibni. But Ya bunay, inside of this word, it implies a lot of love, care, compassion, and mercy. Now, this is the first thing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is teaching us. Allah is teaching us that before a father, before you give advice to your child, you need to make sure and understand that this child knows that you love him before you begin the advice. Otherwise, he goes through one ear and he comes out through the other. And I tell you, this is something. A child automatically assumes that the father is angry, he's upset, he just came back from work, he's fed up, he doesn't want to talk to anyone. And so as soon as they hear the car come into the driveway, everyone just lets go of everything in the hand and they sit down, turn off the TV and turn off everything and just sit down. Why? That's the child, that's how he perceives the father to be. So there's this tension. When the father wants to give advice to his son, he needs to make sure he goes out of his way to say to his son, son, I love you, listen to my advice to you. Then at least it's a bit more acceptable. Whereas when you compare the relationship of a child to his mother, automatically the child assumes the mother loves him. It doesn't need some scientific equation to explain that to him. The child, if the mother was to call him out, I have some advice for you, the heart melts and he listens. But the father needs to go out of his way before he advises his child, needs to tell him, son, I love you, and that is in the form of the Quran, Ya bunayya. That's how it is in the Quran. And it's very important that we learn this lesson. This is why it's repeated over and over in the Quran. So he says to him, Ya bunayya. Now he's got the attention of his son, and the son now he is comfortable. He knows that the father loves him. Now he's ready for advice. So the first advice he begins with him. He says to him, Ya bunayya, innaha in taku mithqala habbatin min khardal, fatakun fi sakhratin aw fi samawati aw fi al-ardi ya'ti biha Allah. This is an incredible example he gives him. He wants to teach him what does it mean that Allah is watchful over all things. But he doesn't just say to him, my dear son, look, I love you, you need to be careful, Allah is watching you in everything you do. That doesn't work. He wants to give him an example of what does that mean. So he gives him a reappreciation of what it means that Allah is watchful over all things. But look at this awesome example. And at the end of it, I'll tell you why it was the best example. He says to him, إِنَّهَا إِن تَكُ مِثْقَالَ حَبَّةٍ مِّنْ خَرْدَلٍ. He said, my dear son, imagine there was a mustard seed, this little tiny seed, and it was buried deep inside a boulder. فَتَكُنْ فِي صَخْرَةٍ. This word fi in Arabic implies something that is deep. فَتَكُنْ فِي صَخْرَةٍ. This little tiny seed, it's buried deep inside a sakhra. A sakhra in Arabic is not a rock. A hajra is a rock. A sakhra is a boulder the size of this room. Huge rock. And imagine the father says to his son, son, go and look for this seed. Go and look for it. Find it and bring it. Now, obviously, that's an impossible task. Where's he going to find this sakhra to begin with? I mean, there are so many sakhra in the earth that haven't even been touched or explored yet. But let's just argument's sake, that the child found this sakhra. And he found this sakhra. What does he need to bring to his dad? This little mustard seed that's buried deep inside of him. Now, it's impossible, but let's just say he found this sakhra. What does he have to do now? In order to extract this seed and bring it out, he'll need to break the sakhra. So let's say, and what kind of power, what kind of might and strength does he need to crack open the sakhra? Even machinery nowadays won't even have a symmetrical cut of it, and it will take days to cut. But let's say he had the power, the strength, and the mind, and he split the sakhra in half, the son of Luqman. Is it guaranteed that this mustard seed is going to be on this side, on the surface of this side, on the surface of this side? Is it guaranteed? No, it's not guaranteed. So what does he have to do? He literally has to smash the sakhra into pieces the size of a mustard seed, then look through the millions of pieces he has, and then find where this mustard seed is and bring it to his dad. Really impossible. But then look what his father says to him. Makes it even worse. He says to him, فَتَكُمْ فِي صَخْرَةٍ أَوْ فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ أَوْ فِي الْأَرْضِ. He says, hang on. Before you go in search of this seed, it could be somewhere فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ. Maybe it's not in a sakhra at all, to begin with. Maybe it's somewhere in the seven heavens. Your job is to go find it. Before you go, 1 second. أَوْ فِي الْأَرْضِ. Maybe it's somewhere in the seven earths. I don't know. It's in this universe, it's somewhere outside this universe. Your job is to go and look for this seed and bring it. What kind of seed? A mustard seed, this little tiny thing. So, what is he speaking to him about? What is this seed? What is the sakhra, the heavens and the earth? Luqman alayhi salam is an intelligent man. And Allah Azza wa Jal loves the example of Luqman, and Allah Azza wa Jal makes this ayah part of the Qur'an, so that we take lessons and derive lessons from it until the day of judgment. He says to him, this habba min khardal, this mustard seed, my dear brothers, is the sin one commits. It is the small as your sin is, that is this mithqala habbatin min khardal, the sin one commits. And he's saying to him, my dear son, you can commit a sin as small as a mustard seed, and go and hide it wherever you want. Hide it deep inside of a boulder, hide it in the earth, in the sky, hide it wherever. Hide it so well that even the own imagination can't even begin to think where it is. And this is the sin one commits. As small as it is and as good as you hide it. You've hidden it so well, just like that example, a mustard seed in a boulder. Who's going to find it? Even the close people around you won't even know about it. Your own wife that you've lived with for 30, 20 years, 10 years, whatever it is, she won't even know about it. Your own father or mother, which you still live with them in the house, they don't know about this small sin you do. It's hidden so well. So he says to him, يَأْتِ بِهَا اللَّهِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bring it out. And he says to him, يَأْتِ بِهَا اللَّهِ. Incredible. You know, in Arabic there are two words, there are two verbs that are used that speak about something coming forward, something being brought forth. You can use the word ja'a or the word ata. Ja'a means to come, ata means to come. And ja'a is something to come with effort. That you say, ja'a al-mudir. Something to come with effort, you'll say the word ja'a. For something like, for example, if someone was disabled and he's on a wheelchair and he needs to come into the masjid, it's going to take some effort, you'll say ja'a. For him, you'll describe his entrance as ja'a because it required effort. But if something comes without effort, then that's called ata. When someone that's healthy walks in, we say this ata al-mu'min, the believer came, but it means that there was no effort required, he just walked in. Allah Azza wa Jal, he says that Luqman says to his son, يَأْتِ بِهَا اللَّهِ. Not قَدْ يَجِيءُ بِهَا اللَّهُ. In other words, for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to identify your sin, as small as it is, and as well hidden as it is, for Him it's يَأْتِ بِهَا. Allah will bring it without any effort. And He knows where it is, when it was committed, how it was committed, why it was committed, and it's brought forth in front of you on the Day of Judgment, and it's not absent from you. يَأْتِ بِهَا اللَّهُ. He teaches him, he gives him a reappreciation of what does it mean that Allah is watchful over all things. And he understands that if I say to my son, Allah is watching, maybe that's just words that go through here and come out from here. So he says, how am I going to put it in such a way where this lesson will stick? And so he gives him this example, and this is why it's an incredible example, because Allah chose it to be part of the Qur'an. يَأْتِ بِهَا اللَّهُ إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَطِيفٌ خَبِيرٌ. Verily Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is latif. Latif meaning He's subtle, He's precise. And you know, how incredible is this? Because you can have all the strength in the world to destroy a boulder, but you might not have the precision to know exactly where the seed is. But Allah Azza wa Jall's quwwah, His strength, is coupled with His precision. And so He knows exactly every single detail about the sin one commits, as small as it is, as well as you've hidden it away from the people. يَأْتِ بِهَا اللَّهُ إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَطِيفٌ and Khabir, the all-knowing of all things. Now He begins to give His son some advice, and this is the last ayah I want to share with you. He told his son first that he loves him, then he told him what it means that Allah is watchful over all things. Now the son is ready for some practical advice. So he says to him again, Ya bunay, aqim as-salah. My beloved son, establish the prayer. You can't say to him, aqim as-salat first and foremost. If the child doesn't have this sense, or if any one of us doesn't have this sense of Allah watching over him, why is he going to pray? What drives you to pray? You need to instill that lesson inside of you, that Allah is watching. When you can understand and appreciate what it means that Allah is watching, now you're prepared and you're ready for some practical advice. So he tells his son what it means that Allah is watching. The son has taken that lesson. Now I tell you some serious practical advice. He says to him, Ya bunay aqim as-salat. Establish the prayer. Institutionalize the prayer. Now this is incredible. He says to him, aqim as-salat. He doesn't just say to him, Ya bunay salli. Ya bunayya salli. My son, pray. No, he says, establish the prayer. And you know, throughout the Qur'an, when Allah Azza wa Jal calls us to pray, it's never salli. It is الَّذِينَ يُقِيمُونَ الصَّلَاةِ وَأَقَامُوا الصَّلَاةِ وَالْمُقِيمِينَ الصَّلَاةِ الَّذِينَ يُقِيمُونَ. It's always, there's this word before this word salat, which is aqim, yuqimu, muqim, and so on. What does that mean? What do we learn from this? You know the word aqim as-salat, it comes from the noun qama, it comes from the verb qama. And qama, this verb, it's associated with building. When you build something, when you build a building, and as it rises, the building only rises on foundations and pillars. That's how the building rises. So when he says to him, aqim as-salat, he's saying to him that your salat is like a building. And the building will only go up with pillars and with establishments, foundations. And so what he says to him is that you need to treat your salat like a pillar in the house. I want you to think just one reflection on this. What does it mean, a pillar in the house? You know, in a house or in a building, everything can be moved around except the pillar. Say if you have your bedroom somewhere, you can move it from one room to another. The microwave can be moved from one room to another. The fridge can be moved from a room to another. Everything can move. The only one thing that you cannot play around and touch in the house is the pillar. You cannot decide to get rid of a pillar from here and move it somewhere else. The whole building will crumble. You can't do that. So he's saying to him that the salat is like this in your life. What does that mean? Meaning he's saying to him that your day is made up of times and appointments and whatever it is. Busy during the day. And the only one thing that cannot afford to be moved from its time is the salat. It's just like a pillar in the building. So in other words, he's saying to him, your work can be delayed. Your dentist appointment can be delayed. You can move it from the morning to the afternoon, that's fine. Everything in your daily life schedule can be moved. The only thing that cannot be moved is the time of salat. When the time of salat comes, you need to drop everything and pray. Because it's like it's a pillar in the building. You cannot move it. So he says to him, Aqim as-salat. When you know Allah is watching, you'll be very careful about your salat. You'll make sure it's done correctly and on its time. And you'll be punctual in its time. Now when you pray, salat doesn't only make you a good person. Salat has a fruit. And salat has a positive consequence. It makes you internally a good person, and it makes you in society a good person as well. So the goodness of the salat isn't limited only to yourself. If you pray correctly and you pray really good, a sign of an accepted prayer is that you become good socially. So now he says to him, أقم الصلاة وأمر بالمعروف وانهى عن المنكر. He says to him, وأمر بالمعروف, enjoin the good. وانهى عن المنكر, forbid the evil. What does that mean? Enjoin the good, forbid the evil. One word, it means stand for justice. Speak words of truth and speak the justice and be helpful in society. And if you see any bad in society, warn about it. Make sure people don't fall into it. This is a natural consequence of salat. I'll give you an example. You know, you're attending the Friday khutbah, you listen to the khutbah, it's finished, it's over, and you walk out, and you go back to work or whatever it is that you're doing. And you're in presence of some Muslims, and someone begins to backbite someone that is not in your presence. Of course, as Muslims, we know that's haram. But most of us just keep on going with the conversation. Now that you've listened to this, I give you this from the Qur'an. A brother is backbiting someone. You turn around and you say to him, brother, this is haram. We should not speak about such and such person because he's not in our presence. And keep in mind, this guy is your friend. Don't be upset from him. Trust me, most of the times, a friend, if you say to him it's haram to backbite, he becomes upset. He becomes upset with you. And he says to you, why are you saying this? Why are you telling me stop backbiting? It's like you've never done this before. Your response is very simple. Your response is, I pray. That's it. And because I pray, the prayer forces me to be good outside. Aqim as-salat. And if you do this properly, you're forced into wa'mur bil ma'ruf wa nahy 'anil munkar. You won't be able to control yourself. That's a good consequence of salat. And I just give you something from the Qur'an so you can reflect on this. Shu'aib alayhi salam, a prophet of Allah, was sent to his people. And his people, of course, were committing shirk, and their crime after the shirk was that they would shortchange the people. They ripped off the people, they stole their wealth. So he comes to them and he says to them, Ya qawmi, awfu al-mikyala wal-mizana bil-qist. You know, deal justly with people and give them their rights and don't shortchange the people. وَلَا تَبْخَصُّ النَّاسَ أَشْيَاءَهُمْ. Don't shortchange the people. You know, these are disbelievers. You know what they say to him? They say to him, Ya Shu'aib. It's very rudely, they say, Ya Shu'aib. Listen carefully. أَصَلَاتُكَ تَأْمُرُكَ أَن نَتْرُكَ مَا يَعْبُدُ آبَاؤُنَا أَوْ أَن نَفْعَلَ فِي أَمْوَالِنَا مَا نَشَاءُ. They said, Ya Shu'aib, is it your salat that makes you command us to tell us to leave what our forefathers used to worship? And is it your salat that tells you to tell us what to do with our money? In other words, these disbelievers, they recognized that the fact Luqman alayhi salam, or that Shu'aib alayhi salam, would stand against his community and he would enjoin the good, forbid the evil. They knew it was the salat that pushed him to do that. So they said to him, As-salatuk, he said, your prayer that lets you do this. And that is the life of a believer. His salat makes him not only good from the inside, also good in society. That's how you know your salat is an accepted salat. When you care about those around you, and you care especially about your friends around you, so what if they get upset? They are going to get upset. So what is the last advice he gives him? He says, وَأْمُرْ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَانْهَى عَنِ الْمُنكَرِ. He says to him, وَاصْبِرْ عَلَى مَا أَصَابَكَ. What do you need? What better tool do you need when someone is upset with you as close as he is because you advised him of something good? You'll need وَاصْبِرْ عَلَى مَا أَصَابَكَ. That's what you need, subhanAllah. It is like he gives him the life. This is the life cycle of a believer. This is his life. He does iqamatul salah, he prays. And then on the outside, in those few minutes or those few hours before the other salat, he's enjoining the good, forbidding the evil. And then after this, he's remained patient because of the abuse of the people. And you know, Naturally, people don't like justice. Naturally, people don't like justice. You know this. Whether you watch the news or you read the newspapers or you listen to the radio, anytime someone got up and spoke words of truth and justice, either they're imprisoned, they're killed, they're exiled, they're stripped away from their citizenship, whatever it is. That's what it is, because people don't like justice, naturally, even within the house. If a child was to say to his father, I think this TV is corrupting my brothers and sisters, the father will say to the man, mind your own business, don't worry about this stuff. You know, justice is not loved. So that when you stand for justice, you are going to get abused. And you're going to get verbally abused, and perhaps even physically abused. You're going to be mocked, insulted, sworn at. People won't like you. What is the advice you need? وَاصْبِرْ عَلَى مَا أَصَابَكَ. This is why he says to him that there's a third principle. وَاصْبِرْ, be patient over anything that afflicts you. Be patient over anything that comes your way of harm. And then in a matter of another hours, there's another salat. And that salat will charge you again. And then you go outside to society, وَأْمُرْ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَانْهَ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ. And then you'll be abused. But remain patient until the next salat. You're charged again. Then again, that's it. This is the cycle of a believer. These are the three things, subhanAllah, that he gives him of advice. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us of those who believe in him. We ask him subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us of al-muqimin as-salah, al-amiruna bil-ma'ruf wal-nahuna 'anil munkar. And we ask him subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us from among as-sabirin, the patient. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. تقدم